Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Last night, the Katona Fire Department held an event for the community at the fire station, and it was called The Blaze. There were food trucks, a bounce house, and, of course, a bonfire. Toward the end of the evening, I noticed two middle school boys throwing green grass and green leaves into the fire. And because I had been working for more than a week on a sermon about Moses in the burning bush, I was looking at those green leaves and grass quite intently, trying to see whether or not they would burn up. And yes, of course, they burned. I'm not even going to pretend to leave you in suspense. After an initial spark and sizzle, the leaves and grass were immediately consumed by the fire. The experience of Moses at the burning bush is not a replicable experience, at least not exactly in the way that Moses experienced it. It's impossible for me to write a sermon on 5 easy steps toward your own burning bush experience. But if you take a moment, I suspect that many of you have had some kind of experience where you felt like you were standing on holy ground. Maybe it was on a mountaintop. Maybe it was in a desert canyon, or on the beach, on the ocean, or a favorite spot associated with a childhood memory, or that time that you accidentally veered off the hiking trail and stumbled upon the most breathtaking view. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that many people have been hiking more often during the pandemic, and especially when all the church buildings were still closed, what a blessing it was to be able to go out into nature, to meditate, or perhaps simply to turn the brain off and enjoy the view. One of my favorite books is called The Solace of Fierce Landscapes. The book describes how there is something healing in even the most barren, unforgiving, desolate desert landscapes. The book was written by Belden Lane. He's an ordained Presbyterian minister who spent his career teaching theology at St. Louis University, a Roman Catholic school, and he's always had a lifelong fascination with Buddhism. All this, Lane believes, gives him a unique interfaith perspective. But what he's spent his entire career studying is the spirituality of place. What is it that makes places sacred? What is it about places that change us? He wrote The Solace of Fierce Landscapes following his mother's long struggle with Alzheimer's and cancer. And he interwove that story with the wisdom of the ancient desert fathers and mothers and his own experience of spending time in the desert. He writes, "The experience of threatening wilderness invites us to the unexplored landscapes of an inner geography, where that which is most deeply us is joined to what we experience as radically other. There is this sense in which the spiritual order and balance of the exterior landscape, even with all its vast emptiness, is a way of healing the broken interior landscape of the individual who comes in need of wholeness." The Moses that we encounter in Exodus 3 is a man whose interior landscape needed healing. Moses had been a Hebrew child raised in Pharaoh's household, and it seemed as though he was not sufficiently Hebrew enough for the Hebrews, and he was not sufficiently Egyptian enough for the Egyptians. And that set the stage for Moses killing an Egyptian in anger because that Egyptian was abusing a Hebrew man. And then Moses became a fugitive, and he ends up in the land of Midian, where he finds a wife and ends up tending the sheep of his father-in-law Jethro. Moses led the flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai will later be the place where Moses disappears into a cloud to talk to God. and he's gone so long that the people build a golden calf. It will also be the place where God reveals to Moses the Ten Commandments, and it will be the place where the prophet Elijah hears the still, small voice of God. Sinai is a sacred mountain, and it is located in one of the fiercest, most unforgiving desert landscapes. Perhaps you've had a powerful spiritual experience in a fierce landscape. Or maybe you prefer the spiritual power of lush green landscapes. Thank you very much. But whatever the topography, a sacred place is a place where you are reminded of your limits, where your agenda is suddenly irrelevant. It is a place where you are caught up in the grandeur of something much, much larger than yourself. Now, I'd like to invite us to a minute of silence. And if you're a Quaker, this will go by in a flash. If you're a Presbyterian, this will feel interminable. But in a moment of silence, think about a place that has had a profound spiritual impact on you. Or it could be a place that left you in awe. But I invite us now to spend a minute contemplating that place. Hold on to that memory or that image. Moses' encounter with God at the burning bush included God revealing to Moses that God had heard the cries of the Hebrews who were suffering oppression at the hands of the Egyptians. And God called Moses to take part in the liberation of the Hebrews that God was seeking to accomplish. Moses' moment at the burning bush was not for Moses' edification alone. It was for the larger purpose of connecting Moses to the work that God was about to do. You see, there will never be a mystical experience of God that doesn't connect us somehow with human need. And I think that this is a very important lesson for our church to remember as we continue to navigate a pandemic landscape and eventually a post-pandemic landscape. Our goal is not to restore everything we did pre-pandemic simply for the sake of restoring it. Our calling is to discover how, at this present moment, we can respond to human need, spiritual human need, and physical human need. Now think about that experience that you were recalling. That experience was not for your edification alone. The God who speaks to you in some kind of a burning bush, or in the commuter train on the way to the city, or on an ocean shore on a moonlit night, or in a quiet place in the woods, is the God who longs to connect you with others who are crying out. I invite us now to spend another minute in silence, contemplating the need, the human need, a spiritual or physical need or both, that somehow that experience revealed or could potentially reveal. how is your experience of a sacred place connecting you with need? Many of you probably know this Frederick Buechner quote, that the place that God calls you is the place where your deep joys meet the world's deep need. That is your Egypt. That is a place that God is calling you to go, where you can help the people of God in all the ways in which you are uniquely qualified to help. That is the place that God is calling you. And by the grace of God, let each one of us respond as Moses did. Here I am, Lord, send me. All glory and praise be to our God. Amen.